Welcome to CBH. Today we're talking about interesting Golden Age precursors to Silver Age Marvel characters. Marvel Silver Age superheroes are a lot of fun and get a lot of screen time in movie theaters these days. Some fans will check out the 1960s comic books and have a great time watching these characters being created by people like Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Stan Lee, Bill Everett, etc. As incredible as these people were, they also read their own entertainment when they were younger, and a lot of that was found in earlier pulp magazines, newspaper comic strips, and Golden Age comic books. This episode focuses as an introduction to some Golden Age comic precursors to some of our favorite Silver Age characters. Just to clarify a point, there is no verification that the 1960s guys read all these particular comics, however they are antecedents and are astonishingly similar to the listed 1940s characters. Now in 1940, Jack Binder created the original Daredevil for Lev Gleason Publications. The original Daredevil also had red hair, a yellow costume, was disabled with the inability to speak, and was labeled, quote-unquote, the Master of Courage. Well, Jack Cole, the creator of Plastic Man, revamped him into a red suit, and his popularity really took off. This Daredevil got removed from his own comic due to waning popularity in 1950, and eventually Lev Gleason lost the rights to the use of the name Daredevil due to falling out of trademark. In 2003, Stan Lee said in an interview that Martin Goodman told Stan to revive the character in 1964, and Bill Everett, Kirby, Ditko, and Lee worked on the first issue, also giving this new Daredevil red hair, a yellow costume, a disability of blindness instead of being mute, and was instead called, quote-unquote, the Man Without Fear. Much like the original Daredevil, he would subsequently be changed from yellow to red by Wally Wood and Stan Goldberg. In 1940, the Golden Age Vision was created by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon in Marvel Mystery Comics 13 as an alien cop from a smoke world dimension. He was revived by Roy Thomas in Avengers 57 1968 with a whole new origin as an android who can control his mass. Roy has mentioned this freely in interviews. The Human Torch first appeared in 1939 Marvel Comics 1 as an android created by Carl Burgos and was written out of his own comic in issue 93, 1949. In Young Men 24, 1953 had Martin Goodman's pre-code 1950s attempt to revive his Golden Age superhero for Atlas Comics. He wanted to compete with DC Superman and possibly start his own version of a 50s TV show, but it wasn't successful. The Human Torch revival that did stick, however, was the 1961 Fantastic Four #1, where this Silver Age take by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee was given a whole new origin and name. Now, Jack Kirby has had a long relationship with the Norse gods. His first published rendition of Thor was after his first Captain America run, the character that he had co-created with Joe Simon. After leaving Timely Comics, he worked at DC, and one story he made was with the Golden Age Thor in DC's Adventure Comics 75, 1942, the villain from Valhalla. He would return to the character in DC's Tales of the Unexpected 16, 1957, The Magic Hammer. His official true Silver Age Thor was the one he co-created with Stan Lee in Journey into Mystery 83, 1962, The Stone Man from Saturn. With Jack Kirby, there is a Thor for each decade. So why would the third Thor fight aliens from Saturn? Well, something really fun about the first appearance of the Silver Age Thor and his defeat of the aliens from Saturn is that Jack Kirby and Joe Simon worked on a similar story for Fawcett's Captain Marvel Adventures #1 more than 20 years earlier in 1941, where they had Shazam be referred to as the Thunder God as he fights aliens from Saturn. Another prelude to Thor from Kirby is found from Young Romance 13, 1949, where a woman, much like Jane Foster, fantasizes about a man she loves as a handsome Viking lover, and note the headdress on the bottom of the first panel. It looks just like Thor's helmet that he later has in the early 60s. Now, speaking of Captain Marvel, the original Golden Age Captain Marvel originally appeared in Fawcett's Whiz Comics #2, 1940. Due to ongoing court battles with the company later known as DC Comics, who felt that Captain Marvel was a plagiaristic copy of their Superman. I know, that's total bullcrap. Well, Fawcett then ceased using the character in 1953. The name hadn't been used in over a decade, so again Martin Goodman, owner of Marvel Comics at the time, wanted the name. And just like he did with the Golden Age Daredevil, he ordered Stan Lee to write a Captain Marvel book and put it in use so they could take the name before anyone else does. Hence Marvel Superheroes 12, 1967 by Gene Colan and Stan Lee, with a costume enhancement in 1960 1969 by Roy Thomas and Gil Kane. The company, later known as Marvel, put their Tarzan pulp clone, Ka-Zar, into his own Golden Age comic with its setting in Africa. This was present in Marvel Comics 1 1939. More than 20 years later, Kirby and Lee revamped him into a new Silver Age version with a new first and last name, and then combined him with the Tarzan-themed Antarctic Savage Land in Uncanny X-Men 10 1965 titled The World That Time Forgot. And that was obviously fusing in Edgar Rice Burroughs' book, The Land That Time Forgot. Now, looking back at Black Panthers, well, there were quite a few before the one we know that was created in 1966, who's about to get his own movie. The first one was in Stars and Stripes 3 1941, created by an unknown writer and artist. Then the Tarzan newspaper strip had a run in 1951 with an evil Black Panther tribe. Then there was Atlas Comics Jungle Tales in 1954 by Rico and Pike about Waku, the African prince who swears to his dead father to protect his people. Then in Two Gun Kid 77, 1965, had a Black Panther type of character by Dick Ayers and Al Hartley. Finally, we have the definitive Silver Age Black Panther currently in the movies that appear to fuses with the African tribe motif into Fantastic Four 52 1966 by Kirby and Lee. Now, Marvel's Cyclops premiered in 1963, and his visor with uncontrollable I-beam powers are certainly well known to most fans. However, he does appear to have a Golden Age literary ancestor, which is found in 1940 Pep Comics 1, The Comet by Jack Cole. Through scientific self-augmentation, he constantly shoots laser beams from his eyes and needs a glass univisor to prevent everything he looks at from getting disintegrated. This is the key gift and curse that also affects Marvel's Cyclops. Of course, there are as many differences as there are similarities between the Comet and Cyclops. This character has that Golden Age charm of flying and murdering criminals in a psychotic rage. The super fast Quicksilver has been a Marvel Comics character since 1964 when he was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and although the official explanation for his powers changes throughout the decades, he also appears to have a literary ancestor. This literary ancestor can be found in Quality Comics Quicksilver, premiering in National Comics 5 1940, also created by the incredible Jack Cole and Chuck Mazzugian. Although he has a totally different origin, his name and powers of super speed are the same. There are many comic book characters who got their powers from cosmic rays, notably Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's Fantastic Four. However, the Fantastic Four's power source appeared to have a literary ancestor in Quality Comics Smash Comics 14 1940. Possibly written by Will Eisner and penciled by Lou Fine, we have The Ray, a superhuman originally augmented by a cosmic glowing storm of light in a low-level space trip in a quote-unquote strato balloon. This sounds remarkably similar to the Fantastic Four's cosmic ray exposure in the space shuttle. Even the Amazing Spider-Man has a literary ancestor found in 1941, the Tarantula, who is, I believe, comics' first Spider-Man, created by Mort Weisinger for what was later to be called DC Comics. He crawls, has a web gun, and is out to get criminals. Something interesting is a panel in this comic showing that he was actually called Spider-Man from a radio announcer. This appears to be a precursor to Kirby and Simon's The Fly character in 1959 and Ditko and Lee's Spider-Man in 1962. Now, Bruce Banner, a scientist mutated by gamma rays into Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's The Hulk in 1962, found a kid sidekick named Rick Jones, which immediately endeared a lot of fans to the character. Well, there's another character called the Heap, created by Harry Stein and Mort Leave for Hillman periodicals in 1942, who was a German pilot mutated by death, swamps, and a quote-unquote will to live into a horrifically changed anti-hero monster. Well, in 1946, the Heap also found a similar sidekick named Ricky Wood, who wore a very close to the same outfit as Rick Jones. The Heap also emotionally bonded with Ricky as the Hulk did with Rick 20 years later because he subconsciously recognized Rick's German model airplane. The Heap, as with the Hulk, was both a friend, protector, and a curse to the young sidekick. Now, Iron Man's Golden Age precedent looks like it could be the 1942 Iron Ace. On a superficial level, they are both armored heroes and have the same title iron font with bolts on the outer edge, but on a deeper level, they share the same type of origin. In Tales of Suspense 39, 1963, Tony Stark was holed up from Vietnamese soldiers and protected by a self-sacrificing Professor Ho Yinsen. The professor's sacrifice allowed Tony to don his iron suit of science to fight off and then escape enemy soldiers becoming Iron Man. Oddly enough, the same story structure is also apparent in Hillman periodicals Air Fighters 2, 1942. A person called Captain Britain was holed up from Nazi soldiers and protected by a self-sacrificing Dr. Lafarga. The doctor's sacrifice allowed the captain to don an iron suit of magic to fight off and escape enemy soldiers, becoming the Iron Ace. There was an odd trend in 1960s Marvel where characters would go to Tibet, get transformed, and come back changed. This is shown with Dr. Droom in Amazing Adventures 1, 1961 by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, Dr. Doom in Fantastic Four 5, 1962, and Doctor Strange by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee in Strange Tales 115, 1963. It looks like they all went to the same foreign medical schools in the same area and each had their own astonishing outcome. Dr. Droom actually turned from Caucasian to quote-unquote Oriental. Roughly 20 years before, there was also a golden age story of a wealthy playboy named Jethro Dumont who traveled to Tibet and was transformed and augmented by the spirit of Lamaism, becoming the Green Lama. He first appeared in a 1940 pulp and got his own comic in Green Lama 1, 1944, with beautiful art by Mac Raboy. Well, this has been a fun episode of Comic Book Historians. Literary precursors are an interesting thing. In some cases, like the Golden Age Daredevil or Captain Marvel, there's a direct link established by interviews, and other times there aren't. So does this mean that these characters were maliciously plagiarized, or does that mean that they were probably read and subconsciously carried over in conversation, or were they just completely original both times, and that this was just an example of parallel thinking in different points in time? And maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe all that matters is that it's the execution each time is what makes it special. Difficult to really say. But it is interesting and fun to see the lineage of these literary super beings. And if it's not a literary ancestor, then it's at the very least a precedent or an antecedent. Cheers.